Coraline, go to your father. The rest of you children may go downstairs too. I believe it takes a village to raise a kid, so you can just get after her like she's one of yours, okay? She stands back there yelling boo. She just loves babies, and she's still, anyone younger than her is still a baby, except her brother, who doesn't count. So
then I can start doing this, going back to the store. Grocery store.
You gonna go back to the grocery store?
Yeah, because I haven't been gone for a long time because of this COVID thing. That's why, but I can start going back now.
I love the grocery store. It is one of my happy places, so I'm very glad you get to go back. I worked for quite a while at Hy-Vee, and when I worked there, I said I hate grocery stores. I'm never going to another one. Brian's going to do all the grocery shopping, and now I love them, except the prices right now. I don't love those, but I do love the grocery store. So today we are continuing on in the Gospel of John, and we are looking at chapter 11. It is not the whole chapter that we are reading today. We're only reading 44 verses. But we're going to read verses 1 through 44 in chapter 11 today. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then, after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you, and are you going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble, because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble, because the light is not with them." After saying this, he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be all right." Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him." Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, yet will they live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When she said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again, greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench, because he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her,
I see
"Do I not tell you?
and
Did I not
welcome.
tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took
and
away the
welcome.
stone, and Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you
see
for having heard me. I knew
and
that
welcome.
you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he said this, he cried out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So I don't choose the text for Sunday. I just want you to know that up front. I follow what's called a narrative lectionary. So these texts are given to me by biblical scholars who are doing their best to work us from creation to the foundation of the church in 9 months. Okay, so they want us to get this huge arching narrative. They want us to see the whole story. And they do this in a 4-year cycle. So you aren't going to see the same creation story every year. They're going to rotate through them. You're not going to hear the same story of Moses every year. You're going to hear about different prophets and different people, but you're going to get that same narrative arch every time, okay? I say that because I wouldn't have chose this text. Here's why. This text is just too much for me right now, to be entirely honest. I am just not in a place that I really want to talk about death at all. So I'm going to start with a funny story to try and lighten myself so that I stop the tears before I even start, right? So last night we're sitting at the table, and my kids have seen a lot of death in their life because number one, they're a pastor's kid, and number two, it's just been a hard season in our life. Killian sits there and he says, "When I'm in the hole, will you throw me in some pie?" And Coral says, "No, I'm not going to give you pie." I was like, "It's okay, Kelly. I'll give you some pie. What kind do you want?" "Blueberry." So when Killian is in a hole,
God's
please throw him in blueberry pie.
God's spirit
So that's my funny
as we bow our bodies
story.
and hearts.
Not really a joke. So here we have the story of Lazarus, and this is a story that is probably pretty well
Let
known.
yourself be stretched and
If you
prepared
grew
to
up in the
see
church,
what is to
I'll say.
come.
Maybe not as popular as Jesus' resurrection story, but a
Face the
man coming
sun
back from
and
the
welcome
dead
what
is a
this
pretty
day
big
holds.
deal. And we have some things that are really important to note in this story. So first off, he's been dead 4 days. And the reason this is important is because in this time, in many of the Jewish communities, it was believed that the soul stayed with the body for 3 days. So this 4-day mark is really a very big thing in the Jewish faith at this time, because no longer is he there. His soul has entirely
The table
left.
is a place
No
of
longer
regrounding.
is it really him.
There is
It is
room
simply
for
his
everyone
body now
at God's
in that
table.
tomb. And so Jesus is coming after
We let ourselves
there's
be
nothing to do.
stretched
His
and
soul's not
prepared
even
to
there.
see
Nobody
what's
can do
to
anything now because his soul has already left. That's
We
how
face the sun
it is looked
and
at
welcome
in this
what
time.
this day
And you
holds.
have Mary and Martha, who we haven't seen in this gospel, okay? So they haven't come in John's gospel yet. But we know other stories of Mary and Martha when Jesus visits their house and one of them cooks and cleans and yells at their sister to get up and help, and their sister has chosen the better way. She's sitting at the feet. The reason I say the sister is because I always get them confused. So one of them did one thing, one of them did the other. That's what we remember. And then we also have a note here in John that tells us of something that we haven't read yet, that is going to happen in like 4 or 5 chapters. Mary washes his feet, and it might even be Martha. See how I'm getting so... It was Mary. Okay, thank you. They can't have 2 M names, okay? It's just not right. They need to be very different. So Mary washes his feet with oil, but beyond that, and it's very expensive perfume, beyond that, she takes her hair, her long hair, and scrubs his feet. It's gross. Janae, it's gross. But it's this very, very big, intimate act, right? And the disciples who are standing there are even like, what a waste. Why would you use this perfume on Jesus' feet? This could feed so many hungry people. And Jesus yells at the disciples about it. So we know that Jesus is very connected to Mary and Martha and Lazarus. So connected that Lazarus is referred to as the one whom he loves. The one whom he loves. It's not your friend. It's not even just Lazarus. It's not even someone you really like. This is the one whom Jesus loves. And yet, Jesus gets this message that his friend is ill, and he doesn't go. He doesn't go see him. I find that very unacceptable. I just do. If someone you really love and care about is ill, to the point that his sisters are saying the one you love is ill, I think you should go visit them. I think you should go be with them. And then he finally does go, and it says he stayed a couple more days. Well, it was more than a couple because Lazarus has now been dead 4 days. So I imagine maybe even like a week almost that Jesus stayed where he was. And when he finally does go, I am totally in the boat with Mary and Martha. Like, if you had been here, he wouldn't have died. Now, I think they're saying it kind of respectfully. I mean, even at laying at his feet and saying it, I think there is respectfulness in this. But I think there is also grief and anger at the fact that had he been there, their brother wouldn't be dead. And you have then the crowd that is kind of split. They see Jesus weeping and think, oh, he really loved Lazarus, which I'm sure he did. But you have the other part of the crowd, and this is the crowd I stand with, that's like, you could heal a blind man and you couldn't stop this? Like, that guy was blind since birth and you healed him. We just read about it last week. And yet, could you not have prevented this man from dying? I really, really resonate here with Mary and Martha and this crowd of people who knows the power of God, the power of Jesus Christ, who believes in him, who trusts him, who knows that he is strong enough to stop death. And yet he didn't. Now, don't get me wrong. I feel for Jesus too. Jesus is openly weeping at the death of this man. Jesus does not openly weep in the Gospels. So imagine like your super, super tough grandfather, right? Who you never saw cry in your life until the day you did. And your entire world crumbled when you saw him cry. This is the strongest person you know, and here he is crying, and you didn't even know he knew how to cry. You didn't even know he had tear ducts. That is Jesus here. This is a man who speaks eloquently, who has healed so many, who has heard painful story after painful story, and never once has he cried. Even in his own death, we will not see him openly weep. And yet here he is with Lazarus, and he is openly weeping. So I feel for Jesus. This is his friend whom he loved. And yet, he could have stopped this. He could have prevented this man from dying. One of the things I do when I struggle with a text is I call and complain to people. That's a very great thing to do, right? Poor pastors, friends. But I was talking to a colleague this week, and he made the comment, Jesus is not in the business of preventing death, but rather in transforming death into new life. Jesus is not in the business of preventing death, but rather in transforming death into new life. He pointed out to me that Jesus isn't about avoiding or eliminating pain, but rather about being with us through the pain, which is what we have here. We have Jesus with Mary and Martha feeling the same pain that they are feeling, the same grief, the same loss, the same darkness. But at the same time, Jesus doesn't allow for that pain to be the end, to be the last word, to be the thing that remains. Rather, Jesus works to transform death into a new way of being, into a new life. Here, it is literal. Transforming Lazarus' death into his new life. And the people around him begin to believe and understand that death does not have the final word. The people around him begin to see that while there is pain and there is grief, that is not the end. That is not the only thing that is left. But rather, together, they can do the work of creating a new life. Lazarus is unbound by the community. Jesus calls all the people to come and unbind him. Together they work to bring about Lazarus' new life. It is the same for us today in the midst of grief. Whether it be the loss of a loved one, or the loss of a job, or the loss of physical mobility, just the loss of the life that we knew. It is painful, and there's no way to prevent that pain. God isn't in the business of preventing the pain, but rather God is in the business of being with us through that pain. Whatever that pain is, God is with us. But beyond that, God calls the community to come together and to be with one another to create a new life. I've been thinking about this a lot. So my biological grandmother died when my mom was 4 years old. And she had 4 daughters, 5 years and under, when she died. And my grandfather was not equipped raising 4 girls by himself. And so a community of people came together to help him. A community of people came together to help him through that grief and also to help him in the new life that they were creating. In no way did it diminish what my grandmother was to them or the memories they held of her. In no way did it take away the pain of that loss. But it created a possibility of new life. A possibility of a life still filled with joy, with growth, but also with sorrow. This new life is never what we imagined, never what we hoped for, never what we thought it was going to be. But it is there, and it is filled with the love and grace of God. My children are adopted, and I talk about that pretty regularly. I think it's great. I'm a big believer in adoptive parents and foster care. Now, the truth is, my children lost a life. The life that they were meant to have, the one that they were born into, the one with their birth parents and their birth family who were supposed to love and care for them for the rest of their life. But, and yet, they have a new life. One with my husband and I, one in a family that is safe, where they are taken care of, where they are fed, where they are loved beyond measure. It is a good and glorious thing. But it doesn't take away the pain of losing their birth family. It doesn't take away the pain of the abuse they endured. This story of Lazarus, I want it to be a story about taking away pain. I want it to be a story about preventing death, because death sucks and pain is terrible. It is gut-wrenching and hard. And I want it to be a story about getting rid of it. But we have that story. That story is coming. But this story, right now, here in this time, it's not about taking away the pain or stopping it from happening. But it's about living in the midst of pain and joy. It's about not letting the pain take over and bind us, but rather to find a way to be unbound in new life, in memories that celebrate and grieve what we lost, but also in the hope and joy of what can be born anew. I am in the midst of my own grief and loss. And I know many of you are too, even if it was years ago. It's still there. And so I am holding on. I am holding on to the fact that new life is here and possible. And that together as a community, we will live into life in its fullest. That is both painful and joyous together. Amen.